We often picture the West as a land of horses, and for Native American tribes, soldiers, and explorers, horses were indeed central. But most pioneer families didn't own horses. They were too expensive to buy and difficult to maintain. Settlers were already stretched thin paying for wagons and supplies. Instead, they relied on mules and oxen. These animals were cheaper, stronger, and could survive on rough forage along the trail. Mules were sure-footed and ideal for mountains. Oxen were slower, but incredibly powerful and reliable. They became the true engines of westward migration. Once settlers reached their destination, these animals continued to be essential for farming and daily labor. Horses may have been glamorous, but practicality ruled pioneer life. Pack carefully. Traveling in a covered wagon meant enduring a relentless pounding. Wagons had no suspension. Wooden wheels and axles transmitted every bump directly to passengers. Prairie schooners were tall and narrow, making them unstable. Every rut sent jolts through the wagon for hours on end. Families tried to reduce the shaking by carefully packing heavy items at the bottom, but nothing could eliminate the bone-jarring ride. Some pioneers chose to walk alongside their wagons instead, but walking hundreds or thousands of miles across rough terrain was exhausting and exposed them to the elements. Either way, the journey was brutal. Prepare for breakdowns. Breakdowns were inevitable. There were no mechanics, no spare parts stores, and no help nearby. When something broke, pioneers had to fix it themselves. Wheels cracked, axles snapped, metal parts wore down. So families carried tools, saws, hammers, nails, spare parts, and relied on ingenuity to keep moving. Repairs often meant unloading the entire wagon and flipping it on its side, all while exposed to weather and danger. Every successful repair was a hard-earned victory. Rain, wind, and dust. Canvas wagon covers offered limited protection. They were made from heavy cotton canvas treated with linseed oil to repel water. Even then, they weren't waterproof. Wind blew rain sideways under the canvas. Dust storms filled wagons with grit. To help, settlers added drawstrings to pull the canvas tight, creating a more enclosed space, like pulling a hood tight around the wagon. Even so, severe weather remained a constant threat. When pioneers prepared for the journey west, they generally chose between two main types of wagons. The most famous was the Prairie Schooner, the classic covered wagon we all recognize. Wooden hoops stretched over the wagon, supporting a canvas cover that offered some shade and limited protection from the elements. This canvas-covered wagon was the 19th century equivalent of a family vehicle, carrying people and possessions across vast distances. From afar, the curved canvas resembled the sails of a ship, earning it the nickname Prairie Schooner. These wagons were built for long-distance travel, but comfort was never part of the design. The other option was the Conestoga wagon. Larger and heavier, it was pulled by teams of up to 6 horses. However, its size made it impractical for long cross-country journeys. Conestogas were better suited for shorter hauls, often used to transport goods rather than families. No matter the wagon type, the journey was grueling. There were no paved roads, only dirt paths worn into the landscape. Rain turned trails into thick mud. Wheels broke regularly. Animals collapsed from exhaustion. Wagons got stuck, broke apart, or failed completely. While wagons were essential, they constantly reminded travelers just how fragile their situation was. Sleeping under the stars. It's easy to assume families slept inside their wagons at night. After all, they had a roof, right? In reality, that almost never happened. The inside of a prairie schooner was crammed with everything a family owned, and the space itself was small, roughly 4 feet wide and 10 feet long. Picture a slightly oversized queen mattress, then fill it with tools, furniture, supplies, and food. There was simply no room left for people. So most nights, families slept outdoors. They laid blankets on the ground or rigged makeshift shelters using canvas and poles. This provided very little protection from heat, cold, rain, or wind. When storms hit, people huddled under their wagons or slept on bare ground beneath them, seeking whatever shelter they could find. Comfort was non-existent, and restful sleep was rare, not to mention the toll it took on their backs. Wild West fast food. Food was another major challenge. You couldn't stop at a store along the trail. Wagons were already packed tight with household goods, not prepared meals. That's where the chuck wagon came in. This wagon served as the traveling kitchen for the wagon train. Similar in size to a prairie schooner, it was designed specifically for cooking and storing food. Most chuck wagons carried a water barrel mounted on the side for easy access. Many even included coffee grinders, a vital morale booster after long days on the trail. Beneath the wagon was a storage compartment called the possum belly, used for firewood and dried cow dung, known as cow chips. On the treeless plains, cow chips were an essential fuel source. Each evening, families gathered around the chuck wagon to eat simple meals, beans, bacon, biscuits, and share stories. The chuck wagon became the social center of camp, essential not just for survival, but for morale. Rivers were among the most dangerous obstacles pioneers faced. Ferries existed at some crossings, but they were expensive. Most families forded rivers themselves. Sometimes they built rafts. Other times, they sealed wagon beds with wax and pushed straight into the water. Oxen strained against the current. Wagons became fragile boats. If a crossing went wrong, wagons overturned, supplies were lost, animals drowned, and people died. Every river crossing was a gamble. The reality of the journey. Despite everything, families pressed on. The promise of land and opportunity fueled their determination. Entire families, children, parents, grandparents, endured these journeys together. Their efforts helped shape the nation, but the expansion came at a terrible cost to Native Americans, who were displaced, confined to reservations, and saw their ways of life destroyed. The belief in manifest destiny drove westward expansion, transforming the country. By the late 1800s, railroads made travel easier, but it was the pioneers in covered wagons who first carved the path. Many didn't survive. Their story is one of resilience and loss. How dangerous was the Oregon Trail? Estimates suggest that between 4 and 10% of travelers died. That means as many as 24,000 people lost their lives. Accidents, disease, exposure, and childbirth were constant threats. Cholera was the deadliest disease. Children were especially vulnerable. Hollywood often exaggerates conflict with Native Americans. In reality, attacks were relatively rare, and interactions were often peaceful or cooperative. When violence did occur, it was frequently fueled by misunderstanding, fear, or aggression from settlers themselves. And the legacy. Many pioneers arrived exhausted, starving, and destitute. Fortunately, established settlers often organized relief efforts, saving lives. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869 marked the end of the wagon era, but the Oregon Trail lived on, as cattle routes, historic landmarks, and cultural memory. Today, wagon ruts, carvings, forts, and monuments remain visible reminders of this chapter in history. The Oregon Trail lives on in museums, protected sites, and even pop culture, from movies to the famous computer game that introduced generations to this harsh reality. Covered wagon travel was not an adventure. It was a test of survival. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything. And if you enjoyed this video, consider watching more in this series. Thanks so much for watching.